6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I followed it.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely
Ready?
I can move you. Making review. Making review.
Say 6,
6,
5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to another fun-filled episode of Rank and Review. I'm your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons, and you found another interesting one this week. Regular guest Jason Dubray and I are going to discuss westerns. This is the second time I've tackled the subject, and I know it's a little bit off-board as far as my typical horror, sci-fi, fantasy thing, but I think there's lots of interesting things to be discussed here. I think it's an interesting bunch of movies and a real tough rank. As usual, you should go into Rank and Review knowing that there's going to be spoilers for the 6 movies being reviewed, and that there's going to be coarse language, most especially from me. Since you like listening to podcasts, you should check out the Shelf Shedding Movie Show, which is hosted by Mr. Dubray. You could also check out the Terror Table podcast, a lifetime of Hallmark, Cobwebs, a Gothic cinema podcast, and Welcome to Riverdale. Those are some good friends of the show that you can plug into your ears if you need more podcast. At you so much for listening to Rank and Review. Send your feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. Check out the website at ranknreview.ca. Thank you so much for listening. Jason Dubray is back on Rank and Review. Thank you so much for yet again returning to the show. And you specifically requested that you wanted to do westerns. Now, are you in love with that particular genre, or was it because that was the one episode where you and I lined up, where you agreed with my choices in the rank?
It was, and I've agreed with you in the past, but all 6 movies. That's the episode where I was like, if I had been the guest and on the rank for that one, the show Sky, I would have been a Rank and Review champion because that was a 6 for 6 for me.
Right.
I have a very, very strong feeling we are not going to go 6 for 6 on these, just knowing your taste as I do now, and you know my taste, but I don't know, we might surprise ourselves here. It was that, and then I mentioned that, and then you said you had another Western show, so I thought, well, let's do something different.
Yeah. But are you a fan of that aesthetic? Like, yeah? I
am now. I wasn't growing up. I think I had an idea that the Western was kind of like the old Cowboy Indians TV show type of thing. And I didn't take it seriously. I didn't think that the actors in it were that particularly good, that the stories were interesting, until my uncle took me to see Unforgiven in the theater.
Right.
And I remember, like, now to watch it, it's not as shocking, but I remember the complexity of the storytelling. I thought, well, I've misjudged this genre. It's not the first time I've misjudged a genre, by the way. And I started to watch more Westerns after that. It still is a little bit of a slow crawl to enjoying them. I really like them now, the age that I am now. But I've always liked the darker ones, the ones that are more R-rated. The violence is more in your face. A less glamorous version of the Old West. that's the type of Western I enjoy
In
more
a
than some
weird
others.
way, Westerns, I don't know if that's what they are or that's what they've become, are starting to have more in common with like your post-apocalyptic sci-fi. In that it's presenting a world that no longer exists, but these people are living hard lives throughout it. Honestly, for the most part, I associate most of these movies with like my dad. Even in A Valley of Violence, which he never got to see, unfortunately. If he saw it, he would have totally loved that movie, right? This is the kind of thing that my old man would be watching on a Saturday afternoon that I would have to impatiently sit through while I was missing my cartoons on the other channel.
Yeah.
So that bore some built-in resentment to it. But as far as the things that Dad would watch, a vintage Clint Eastwood Western was fairly watchable by my standards. You knew someone was going to get shot, right? So I do find them entertaining, but I wonder now with the whole romanticism, well, it's either one side or the other, either the super dark version of the West, the Bone Tomahawk West, or the super romanticized sort of Gunsmoke West. I don't think either of them were ever real. Like, I wonder if we've ever truly seen an authentic period Western or what that would actually feel like. To me, these are exercises largely in style and in sort of classic, usually retribution storytelling. Usually we have somebody who is wronged who is going to make that wrong right. Or your classic man with no name who shows up in a town, changes it for the better, and then leaves. They're tales as old as time, and really, narratively, very few surprises to be found in most of these movies. I won't say all of them, but in most of these movies, within the first 10 minutes, you get a good idea of what you're going to get, and you're not wrong about that.
Yeah.
It's a genre that really gives service to people who appreciate it. Almost comparable to the slasher genre in a way. Like, if you want something where you know what you're going to get, Western's a pretty safe bet. I mean, not to say that there aren't comedic Westerns or more dramatic sort of leaning Westerns. These are, for the most part, I think, action pictures that we're talking about here. So we've got a range between the 60s and I think it was 2016 for Valley of Violence. Did you notice anything other than, obviously, the technical filmmaking? But as far as the more modern age Western towards the more traditional Westerns of the 60s and 70s, did you notice a change in that was good or bad or indifferent?
I mean, I feel like they're of their era, and there's a certain style connected to each time Westerns. I think the most modern ones that we look at look nice, are a little bit cleaner looking in some ways as far as the filmmaking and the quality of film. I don't know if they're necessarily as compelling as the B movie Westerns, and I guess the closest that you could call a B movie perhaps here is A Fistful of Dollars,
right?
Or the spaghetti Western, which was its own thing, and it was kind of a bit of a miracle that it became such a prominent subgenre of Westerns for that long. If you just look at it from purely like visual and aesthetic point of view, they're maybe not as sharp, but there's some sort of a strange finger on. And one of my frustrations is from viewing to viewing, I either love the movie or I hate it.
Oh, wow.
Versus, I'd use the word hate again. I just stopped using the word hate. Dislike, greatly dislike. I'm a bit dramatic with the hate word, but not hate. I'm just like, I feel like this is awful. Why did I ever like this? And then I returned for maybe a third or fourth time. I'm like, yeah, I was right the first time. I really enjoyed that. So that's a mystery there. I don't think the modern Westerns have that kind of experience. Either it's a sharply made Western, which is very compelling, and it's one that I want to revisit, or it's not, and there's no real reason for me, unless I'm reviewing it for your podcast or for my podcast, to look at them again. So I don't know if they're I feel like there's potential for modern westerns to be amazing now, but I can't name a whole lot of them that are.
Yeah.
But Bone Tomahawk was definitely one that was very unique in a way. Like the blending of.
I think that's what makes it stand out, is because of how like different it is. But for the most part, I don't see that in westerns, and even some of, I'm trying to think of more high profile quote modern westerns like Open Range or Silverado.
Yeah.
They seem slavish almost to the template of the western. They don't seem at all interested in moving anything forward. They just want to be as good a western as they can be. So I find that interesting about it. I
like that they pay homage to the westerns of yesteryear, but they're not necessarily like the five that is the best westerns of all time. I also wanted to shout out a recommendation that you gave me a while ago now, but The Burrowers, which is a brutal horror western. I love that one. That's terrific. So I think the trick to modern westerns is they almost have to be amalgamated with some other genre that people will be willing to part with their money or spend their time with. I don't know if there are many westerns on their own that do as well as when, coming from the tradition of the television western and into like the John Wayne and Clint Eastwood age of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. And this is something that I can't overstate to the people who are coming into the westerns as sort of newbies. The western genre in the 50s and 60s and even creeping into the early 70s were as big as like the superhero genre is today. Westerns were for a time huge, and that time has passed. Like every now and then we'll see a little, a year where we have 2 or 3 westerns in one year, and people say, is the western coming back? And sometimes I want to believe it, but I kind of don't. I think that there'll always be 1 or 2 westerns that'll be coming around the corner, but I don't see a return to that particular fascination with that period. The romanticism of that age is something that I like to talk about. It's the same thing like with gangster movies, how we love us gangster movies, but even the best of them, like The Godfather, is absolutely like a romanticized version of it. In these movies, we're asked to like, Billy the Kid and Wild Bill Hickok. And in the real world, I think if we were to interact with those guys, I don't know that we would like them very much. I don't know that they are, romantic figures as such. They're outlaws and murderers. But for some reason, we like outlaws and murderers, most especially in the area of Western. And that's something that we're going to be seeing throughout these movies that I wanted to tap into, because I was just sort of trying to see like what the real thread between all of these movies are. I think there's several, but that gray morality is definitely there.
Yeah. I think Unforgiven is as great as it is, and I don't think I completely got it when I was young and saw it, but I revisit that one a lot. I've used it in my teaching to teach satire, believe it or not, and some other some techniques. I think there's a lot of stuff there, but one of them is debunking the myth of the Western hero. And Eastwood himself doing that was brilliant in a way that all of these supposed heroes that are written about were drunks and murderers, and their reasons for attacking people were not noble. They were because somebody like slept with some other girl or some problem, and they get into a gun battle over that.
Card game.
Well, what I'm saying is that most of the Western heroes we talk about were really like drunk.
They were drunks, yeah.
And that also.
Okay, you were cutting out there a little bit, but what you're saying is basically a lot of the historians have done a lot of the work as far as romanticizing these drunken bullies into heroic Western figures. And I absolutely agree with that. It's just interesting. And obviously these are all fiction films, but they're embracing it. Even though they're about, quote, true figures, none of these movies are pretending to be real world. In fact, when Young Guns 2, does that, well, we'll get to it when we talk about Young Guns 2, that movie almost tries to tell, revisionist history, right? But for the most part, I think that the job of these movies is to entertain. That's all they want to do, and that's the goal. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Westerns or this particular group of 6 before we list them off and start?
It was a tough rank. There are 4 that I really, really like, and they were all very close. So I think 1 to 4 is going to be a very thin line. And then there were 2 that I don't particularly care for as much. It's not that I don't like them. There's some merits in them. There isn't anything that I think is awful here. But it just didn't appeal subjectively to my taste in Westerns as much as the other 4.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, because I have a 4-2 split as well. But I wonder if they're going to be in the same place. The 6 Westerns that Jason Dubray, host of the Shelf-Shedding Movie Show, are going to be ranking with me. We're going to talk about A Fistful of Dollars. We're going to talk about Young Guns 2. We're going to talk about The Wild Bunch. We're going to talk about Wild Bill. We're going to talk about In a Valley of Violence. And we're going to finish with another Clint Eastwood Western, The Outlaw Josey Wales. Thanks for doing this, brother.
This short cigar belongs to the man with no name. This long gun belongs to the man with no name. This poncho belongs to the man with no name.
Rigo! Heard you wanted to see me. What's wrong, Ramon? You losing your touch? Shoot to kill, you better hit the heart. Aim for the heart or you'll never stop me.
The man with no name. Danger fits him like a tight black glove. He is perhaps the most dangerous man who ever lived.
Fistful of Dollars, Sergio Leone, Clint Eastwood, spaghetti western. The words that come to mind right away is I fucking conic. Okay? Like, just the image of the poncho, the cigarette, the cowboy hat, the grizzled face, that gnarled sort of hard line, of a mouth that Clint comes in. The man with no name shows up in this town, and believe it or not, Jason, there are 2 warring factions, one in charge of guns, one in charge of alcohol, and he's going to play both sides against each other, and he's going to make friends with people, and the people that are his friends are going to get caught up in the violence as well, and it's all going to work out exactly how you would expect it. Now, that's easy to say now, today, 2021, but when this movie came out, I think it was a real exercise in style in the Western form. People had been watching Westerns every day on TV. There was nothing particularly special about another Western. What they brought to the table was cool, was style, was just sheer fucking badassery. And even when I was a kid and actively didn't want to like these Westerns because I was being deprived my cartoons, I had to respond positively to this iconography. Like, I get why Stephen King plucked this character into a major narrative of his fiction in the Gunslinger sort of Dark Tower universe. And I get that people would say, looking at it objectively, well, yeah, it's every story ever told, and it's badly dubbed. And you're right, and I absolutely love it. In fact, controversially, this is my favorite of the trilogy. Now, it could be because it's the first one I saw. Sometimes it's just that first impression is the one that makes it, but they keep on trying to elevate things moving forward here. And to me, they really nailed it as far as the aesthetics first time out. In a way, A Fistful of Dollars is every sort of shoot-'em-up Western that you've ever seen, but it's also the shoot-'em-up Western in a lot of ways. So You're not going to hear me saying too many shitty things about A Fistful of Dollars. This is where I start.
Yeah, it was a few months ago, but I watched The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for a future show that Lee Beckman will be on for my podcast. I'm not sure when that will be yet, but and I was reminded how much I love The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But what I like, I haven't returned The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is obviously considered the best of the three.
Universally, except for me.
Yeah. I may be closer to agreeing with you, actually, because I return to A Fistful of Dollars a lot more than The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly feels like a sit. It feels like I'm going to have to rev myself up to watch it. And when I'm in there, then I'm like, oh yeah, why did I wait to do this? But A Fistful of Dollars is very compact. Like, it's a smaller story set in the one town, and we just get to see like an intelligent Western hero who doesn't say a lot. Obviously, a man with no name, but also Eastwood. He asked for most of the dialogue to be cut. He said the script was way too verbose when he joined onto the project. And it's just him observing what's going on, who has the power, who doesn't have the power, and working it to his advantage. But his motivation is not that pure. He simply wants to get money and then leave the town.
But he wants to make what he calls an honest dollar. He doesn't want to steal the money. He wants to earn it, but his way of earning it might be less than conventional.
Yeah. But I like that as a selfish reason.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more honest than he's just some guy who comes into town and sees a wrong and wants to become the hero and then leave town, where it's like what you were describing before, the traditional formula for Westerns. And Eastwood was in a lot of Westerns like that. But this one, he's a smart guy, and he is smarter than the boss for these two dangerous gangs. But he does it in a way that they think he's not that smart, that he's a bit of an idiot, or he's, or he's just kind of a useful henchman, and that's it. And I really like how it unfolds. This is one where I watched it. I think the first scene is a bit of a problem because you have to acclimatize yourself to the dubbing.
Yeah.
And that child with the voice that no child would have early on, and it just, things aren't matching, and it's just like feeling, okay, this feels awful. And so I've had sometimes where I watch this and I'm just like, I don't know why I like this movie, because this, on the surface, this is not, I get it's the style of the spaghetti Western, but it's kind of annoying in some scenes, and you have people that are overacting and nobody understood each other on set. So it kind of makes sense.
Well, I'm with you.
But it does sort of work in the end. And this time, it was probably my favorite viewing of this movie. I really had a good time with it throughout. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with you about the dubbing. Like, one of the corners of horror that I have trouble with is Italian giallo horror cinema. And I really do wish, like, they had this idea of shooting with a lot of English actors and letting the other actors speak in their own language and just redubbing it. And that way they can distribute the film throughout the world, dubbing it in whatever they want. But please, please, please give me the subtitles. Every single time I will take the subtitles. And it's a hard barrel to get over. Sometimes I can, but it's a rare movie that does it. This movie does. When I first saw this, is how young I was. I didn't understand the idea of, like, dubbing. Like, I didn't get why the lips didn't match their mouths. It was just this weird layer of separation that everybody else had that effect to them, except for Clint Eastwood. He was like the only character in this world that made sense somehow. But you're right, it's distracting, but you do get used to it. You're right to flag that, because right away it's there, and you have to kind of like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. But once you settle into the waters, it's easy going. I do think this is a pretty great entry point for the Western in a lot of ways, if you can get past the dubbing, because it is absolutely classic in its form. I also, you're talking about him being such a badass. He's a badass, he's cool, and he also has this gallows humor about him. He's in the town, half an hour? And he makes his first play? and he walks past the mortician or the guy who makes all the coffins and says, "Get 3 coffins ready." And then he shoots 4 guys, and on the way back he says, "Sorry, I meant 4 or whatever. I was wrong." And again, it seems like it's sort of cheesy thing in a way to repeat it now, but at the time, that was like hardcore, dark, and heavy, right? And this is our protagonist, and he just killed 4 guys he didn't even really know. He just knew that they were, gangstery. And he has made an impression.
Yeah, and Eastwood, and this is very, very early in his career, but he sells those lines so well. Like, not just anybody could have done this. And they were looking at a lot of different figures. Like, Eastwood was probably the 10th person they approached for this project.
Yeah.
He was
TV
a
actor.
supporting TV player on Rawhide, right?
Yeah.
It was even offered to somebody else in Rawhide before him. And then his co-star recommended Eastwood, and it's probably the lowest paycheck he ever received in his life.
But it defined him. It defined his career.
Yeah. So it was, but it very much announced him as a filmmaker. Like, one of my strange theories about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, have you seen it?
I have.
Yeah. Is that in some way that the Leonardo DiCaprio character is some version of Clint Eastwood? It's sort of a struggling television actor who goes off to Italy and makes these movies and then comes back and is a bigger star.
Right.
Yeah, I have no evidence that he lived anywhere near Sharon Tate or Roman Polanski, but I just think because Tarantino is so influenced by this trilogy and this movie is one of his favorites. Yeah. I feel like that was at sort of the back of his mind with this. So
I definitely feel that sort of badass Tarantino attitude. I totally would believe that, and he loves the westerns. But it's also interesting to point out, you're right, Clint Eastwood was not Clint Eastwood when this movie made. Sort of little feedback there. In a way, he was slumming it, and he ended up doing this super cheap Italian spaghetti western, and it completely changed his world. And, cinema, really, because there's so many emulators. It made westerns dark and edgy for a good while. No Fistful of Dollars, really, no Wild Bunch. I think it was a stepping stone to get us towards Peckinpah's epic there as well.
Mm-hmm. Which is a good thing.
So yeah, it's a weird movie to talk about because, like I said, it's such a bone simple narrative. You've seen this movie before, whether or not you've seen it before. It is the kind of epic template shoot 'em up western, but I don't know. I think because between the dubbing, between the the sort of strange distance that you have from it, it has this other quality. It stands out. Even its flaws, in a weird way, helped this movie when it first came out. Maybe it's aging it now, but when it first came out, all of its flaws just made it stand out more and made it, beg for attention. And the fact that it's still an iconic movie this many years later, when, the bulk of the kids out there don't give a shit about westerns, they all know at least who Clint Eastwood is. And when they have that picture in their head of the Clint Eastwood western, this is the picture that they have in their head.
This guy, the man with no name, who in this script is referred to as Joe at one point.
That's true.
But it's the journey. You may know where it's going, but the journey is so enjoyable. Just the obstacles he encounters, how he finds ways to screw over both of these gangs. It is brilliant. He does a noble thing in the middle there where he tries to figure out a way that this young family can escape from this servitude, this kind of this imprisonment with the gangs, and just how he goes about that, and that sequence, and towards the end, and you're like, why do we have this huge sequence where we just see Eastwood just shooting bullets randomly into Middle, and then we get the payoff, which is a very famous scene from this movie, as good as "Go Ahead, Make My Day" or like any of those moments. Like that, the moment of that, the climax of the film, where this guy almost becomes like he's immortal, or he's from something supernatural, and we see the reason for that. That reveal is like, it's so obvious, but the first time, and I saw it when I was younger, I was like, that I did not know that was coming, and that is brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, and it was set up from beginning to end.
Well, and
so
the idea during a gunfight or anybody who's military trained, even if you're not a sharpshooter, quote unquote, is you go for center mass. I guess the whole idea of hiding the metal under his shirt depended on the fact that nobody made a headshot. But that's badass. That's him laying all his cards on the table. You know what it made me think of, Jason, strangely? Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
Yes, yeah. I love that freaking movie. I do.
It's sort of a Western too, isn't it?
It is.
Is there anything else you want to say about A Fistful of Dollars? I mean, if you haven't seen A Fistful of Dollars, I don't know what to tell you. You should watch it.
Like, check it out, and don't let the style get in the way. And maybe you need to watch it once and absorb the style, but I guarantee you're going to think about it and you're going to return to it. It's not a long watch. It's just a terrific Western.
One thing I would say, and this is close to a negative, I guess, other than the dubbing, some of the sound cues, which are cool and badass, are reused an awful lot. They will use the same sound cue and just ride it into the ground. So if that's something that's going to bother you, that might be there too. But again, this is a quibble.
One more thing.
Yep.
Apologize. I can't go by without crediting the late Ennio Morricone.
Oh, of course.
His music score for the trilogy and most of Sergio Leone's films. But this one isn't as famous as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but it is a great Western movie score, one of the best.
Agreed.
I never stole a horse from someone I didn't like.
Now you just kill him.
What they are reading about is a 21-year-old delinquent
What scum?
who is making us look like imbeciles.
Politicians, bankers, cattle kings. Scum.
I got 18 dimes in each barrel, boy.
You're starting to believe what they're writing about you, aren't you? Oh, Bob! You wrote a 15-year-old boy straight into his grave.
Goodbye, Bob. Best $1.80 I ever spent.
And the rest of us, straight to hell.
I don't take to tenderfoots in my gang.
It ain't your gang, Dave.
Let's hire a thief.
$1,000, Mr. Garrett.
To catch one.
And all the resources you need to carry out the extermination.
Just playing the game, Doc.
Of one William H. Bonney. Even their horses are crazy.
We'll give him a game, all right.
They're starting to surround us. We gotta get out of here.
Dave, it's your gang.
What? It ain't my gang, it's your gang. It's always been your gang.
Emilio Estevez, Kiefer Sutherland, Lou Diamond Phillips, Christian Slater, Balthazar Getty, Alan Ruck, James Coburn, and William Peterson as Pat Garrett.
Yoo-hoo. I'll make you famous.
Young Guns 2.
So, Young Guns 2. One of the many things I love about doing this podcast is that, like, I revisit movies that were from my youth and I discover new things about them. I mean, I was probably going to get around to watching Young Guns 2 again sooner or later. Maybe one of the boys would start getting interested in Westerns or whatever. But it had been a while since I'd watched Young Guns 2. And, I mean, it's a diverting, fun enough, is what it is, shoot-'em-up action movie. But I kept on being surprised by faces in this movie. I had no memory of Bradley Whitford or Viggo Mortensen or Scott Wilson being in Young Guns 2. But all three of them are. I think I will start with for me, what is the most problematic thing about the movie, not counting Emilio Estevez. It's the framing mechanism of old Emilio meeting a lawyer on the side of the highway and telling us this entire story as if Billy the Kid was not in fact murdered by Pat Garrett, and that like he survived, and that we should be okay and happy about it. This whole framing mechanism and revisionist look at Billy the Kid is not only just on its face a bad idea, it's not well executed. I mean, I think the old age makeup is fine considering the time it came out in, but I got real sick listening to Emilio's narration of this is what an old person sounds like. It every time he speaks, even just in his narration or we cut back to him, it completely takes you out of the movie, or takes me out of the movie. And it's a problem. And the other thing...
You can say you as well, I would agree.
Yeah, okay. The other thing that hurt me about it, because especially when I was younger, I had real affection for that first Young Guns.
Uh-huh.
It kind of brought the band back together and then killed them. And I mean, if that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do. But for me, kill all of them. I felt burned that, you know, our beloved Doc and Lou Diamond Phillips' character, whose name escapes me right now, Chavez. Yeah, you know, they all, you know, meet their maker, but Billy gets to skip by and, you know, end up an old man asking for a pardon. And, again, getting this heroic display. Emilio, and I complimented him about this when I reviewed the first Young Guns movie, is good at playing crazy, joyful, bloodlust Billy the Kid. When he's laughing and letting out the one-liners while he's shooting people, as an actor, that's when I'm most believing Emilio in these movies. But that goes nowhere to making me like his character, right? Like, he is somebody who enjoys killing. He can shoot a guy, like, let out a zinger, and then laugh at how funny his own zinger was. You just killed a dude. Even if that dude was bad, you're bad too, you know? So I guess I have problems with this idea of trying to make Billy the Kid like a straight hero as opposed to an anti-hero. But if someone was to ask me, like, is it an entertaining movie and, like, is it worth watching? I think I would say yes, with the measured condition. Like, in a weird way, Young Guns 1 felt like an 80s Western, and only, like, 5 years later, Young Guns 2 feels like a 90s Western. And to see that aesthetic is kind of interesting by itself. And like I say, to see all of these faces, really, it's kind of an incredible cast. Maybe not at the time, but watching it today, it's like wall to wall. It's like some Altman film is being cast here or something like this. So I think it's got way more talent in it than in a way it deserves. And it's got enough energy that it keeps me entertained. So I have a guilty pleasure relationship with both the Young Guns movies. This is definitely the lesser of the two, but I would give a conditional pass for Young Guns 2. Is that fair, or is my nostalgia making me drunk?
Yeah, you probably have a more of a history with it and enjoyed it younger. I haven't watched it a whole lot. I watched Young Guns ahead of this to remind myself, and then into Young Guns 2. And I guess one of the things is I don't particularly like Young Guns, and it is hands down much better film than Young Guns 2. So it's going to be an uphill climb for me to get there, you know. So for years, I've listened to your podcast, and every time an Emilio Estevez movie comes up, you talk about you just don't like him. You feel like he's taking somebody else's spot. You don't. It's a personal thing. Is that you can't quite put your finger on it.
Yeah.
Watching Young Guns 2, probably a bit more than Young Guns, but a little bit for me in Young Guns as well. I was getting what you are talking about. I found him distracting and annoying, actually, as Billy the Kid. It was like a bad audition to be at the Joker or something that's going on there, when he would cackle and do all of that seemingly out of nowhere, just because, like, okay, somebody died, so now it's time, or I'm doing something kind of ballsy, so now I have to laugh maniacally like that. It felt like I would see him acting the whole time. It's probably was a good casting choice in the 80s and into this one. But looking at who else was involved with this, and it is a talented cast, I don't know that they're necessarily used that well. From this particular film, not to review Young Guns itself, but from Young Guns 2, I really, really like Kiefer Sutherland.
Yep.
I liked him in the first one. I think it's very convoluted what they do to bring him back into the story, because that they spent so much time on that romantic relationship in Young Guns.
And they sort of promised us a happy ever after for Doc at the end of Young Guns.
Yeah, and they completely ignore that. I mean, there is one reference that he has a family that he needs to get back to.
Yeah.
But then that's it. I think that's the explanation as why he's there. But it's kind of thankless, and Kiefer Sutherland is a way, way better actor than Emilio Estevez. Well, and I don't know how he would have done as Billy the Kid, but he, to me, as an actor, would be a better choice.
He's the better actor, and he got the better part. I think Doc is the better part between those two.
Really?
But yeah, I would love to see Kiefer playing the Billy the Kid role. But you know who else I would like to see the Billy Kid role? Anybody else. But for all of my criticisms
Christian
of him,
Slater would be perfect.
Yeah, Christian Slater would have been good too.
Christian Slater is the movie. Like
Emilio,
these guys have nothing to do. Like they're there, and they were kind of okay. The Brat Pack's gonna put on a Western. It felt like the junior cast showed up for these Westerns. Yeah. That's what I've had trouble with Young Guns. And like Christian Slater is an interesting actor. I don't know a whole lot about this Arkansas Dave Rudabaugh. But like they play in this thing that he wants to be the leader, but he's not a leader, and he's kind of racist, replacing the Dermot Mulroney character from Young Guns in that way, towards Lou Diamond Phillips' character, and that's all we get. So there's not a whole lot for him to do. Kiefer Sutherland, I like when he, calls Billy on his shit, but again, I don't think Kiefer Sutherland is used to his full ability in Young Guns 2 in particular. Maybe a bit more in Young Guns.
I think that the Doc character, in a lot of ways, internally, is closer to the Christian Slater character than he wants to believe. On some level, Doc does want to be Billy the Kid. In a way, he does want to be in charge. He does have this in him, but he fights it. Whereas these other guys embrace it, this dark side to themselves. Doc keeps on trying to tell himself he's not one of the boys, and he's definitely one of the boys. And again, that's an interesting note to play, and unfortunately most of the other actors don't have that to play. Alan Ruck is a complete nothing character in this movie.
No.
I mean, I like the actor, but again, just give him something to do. Just give him something to do. The other thing about the performance from Billy, from Emilio, is that I think that we're asked to like Billy because of the joy he takes in everything he does. Not because of what he says or what he does, but because of the joy he has in what he does. Like, it hurts the stakes, because he's supposed to be getting a little bit desperate here. Like, the idea that he would come in and talk about, turning himself in or making a deal for a pardon is not exactly the most gangster, badass Billy the Kid move. So he should be rocked back and on his heels. We should see, even if he doesn't want to show it, that he knows he's in a world of shit. And that never happens at any point in the movie. Even the old version of Billy the Kid, when he's got weeks to live and he says he's dying, you don't believe that he believes it when he says that he is dying. So you are emotionally standing apart. And I think the movie, I guess, is effective. The relationship with him and William Peterson, who's playing Pat Garrett, and they were friends in this sort of version of the story. So that successfully, and that successfully makes you kind of resent the Pat Garrett thing. Not that being deputized and hunting down outlaws was bad, but they were friends, and this does feel like a betrayal in this version of the story. Of course, it's a cop-out, because in this version of the story, Billy is not killed by him. So then it makes you wonder what all of that build-up was for. But as far as the shootouts, the action sequences, did it work for you on that level at least?
They're okay. I don't know. I'm so in between on them because I wasn't terribly invested. Like, if Billy the Kid had full on been shot early in this film, I would have been like, great.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
There was nothing that measured
the villains.
Yeah.
James Coburn.
Yes.
He is, and I don't know if I forgot or whatever that he's in the movie. When he shows up, I'm like, thank God some adult has come to supervise this party that's gotten out of control.
That's a good scene.
His few scenes in the movie are so good, and I'm just left with his character kind of disappears. Like, why couldn't we have had more of him?
Yeah, he definitely was filling the role like that Jack Palance thing. Like, he was really going for it and like just chewing it. Like, he hated Billy so much, like that you could just, he was drooling how much he hated Billy. But again, the movie did come alive when he was on screen, and there were a few moments like that. I really liked the scene, and this goes back to me being a kid too, where Christian Slater and Lou Diamond Phillips get in a fight in this graveyard. Christian Slater wants to loot the bones and the, whatever's left behind in this graveyard, and they get into a really brutal fight over it. But I don't know. There was something about how it started small and escalated to the point where you believed they were actively trying to murder each other. That little scene by itself had a complete beginning, middle, and end that was, even though it was just two guys having a fight, was dramatically satisfying. And more scenes like that would have helped. I think that I have an attachment to the franchise is the problem. Like, I really like the first Young Guns, and I wanted to like the second Young Guns enough to give it a pass. Again, it really hurt my feelings when, Kiefer Sutherland gets riddled with bullets and unceremoniously drops. And it's just like, well, at that point, my emotional investment in the movie pretty much dies with Doc. Because once he died, I knew everyone else was going to die. Once Doc's off the table, like, okay, everybody's going to go. And it wasn't that I was, like, crying and heartbroken and, oh, why did you do this to me? But my energy level just sank. And, like, I was bummed for the character, but I was also bummed for the movie. Because I knew my hopes of it getting any better at this point were diminished.
I think it was supposed to be, like, the equivalent of when Charlie Sheen gets it in the first movie, where you're not expecting that to happen. But in this case, I would say I must have been emotionally enough invested in that part that I was like, oh no. Yeah.
Shit, there goes the actor.
I think there's still a half an hour of this movie left, and I can't at least tolerate it because I'm not going to see Kiefer Sutherland anymore, and James Coburn seems to have disappeared from the film. So
I will say though, if you have to go out in a Western, that is the way to go.
Oh, great way to do it. There are a couple other things I want to mention as positives because I'm sounding pretty negative here. I do think it is an entertainment. You could do a lot worse. Believe me, a lot worse. So I'm not completely putting my thumb down. I'm just very much in neutral land with this one.
Yeah.
But of course, like, this was the rare time that a rock artist did a song for a movie and it got an Oscar nomination.
That's right, John Bon Jovi. Also the first person killed in the movie, John Bon Jovi.
Yes, yeah. So that Blaze of Glory song, it's a really good song.
Yeah. By Bon Jovi standards, sure.
by Bon Jovi standards, but I think I'm stretching for positives here, and so it kind of shows up very much at the end. It fits this story really well, particularly when they're going to kill off as many people as they do, which I don't mind in most Westerns. It was just Emilio Estevez that survived, and that was not. Billy the Kid survived, and that wasn't quite right. What's the name? I'm trying to find the name of even though it's such a cliche character, but like that prostitute. I liked her too.
Right. Jenny Wright, I want to say, is the name of the actress.
Viggo Mortensen is very good too.
Supporter,
I didn't mind him. Bradley Whitford, he looks so young. Jenny Wright. Jane Greathouse. Yeah, I liked her. She was a standout for me for some reason. I liked her scenes.
Well, she
I mean,
rode naked on a horse. That stands out.
That's before that I was impressed, but then I was like, oh, okay, good for her doing this, and kind of doing a giant FU to the entire town as she left there. But that was good, and like she actually had something to do. Yeah. I mean, you know that
you like her, you should check out an old '80s vampire movie called Near Dark. She's in that. She's super hot.
Yeah, I have seen Near Dark,
and
I just didn't clock her as being the same actor from that. So that's good to know. There's something else I kind of want to say. What was the? Oh yeah, just how many movies in the 1980s 1990s, and I excuse this, and I still excuse this, but it starts off with an old man doing the entire thing as a flashback from Young Guns 2 to The Green Mile, you know, and it was used a lot, but this is probably the clunkiest I've ever seen it, because I don't believe that this man's going to stand at the side of the road and have like a 2-hour conversation with this guy who he thinks is insane and is claiming to be Billy the Kid.
Yeah, like, I think there was a somewhat overrated, I think, Western called Little Big Man, starring Dustin Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
And
I reviewed it on
there you go. And I think
yeah.
that was the movie that's kind of responsible for popularizing that way of telling the story. And, you know, the old age makeup and everything like that. And again, the first few times you see it, maybe it's got its qualities, but once you recognize it as a handle into the story, it just sort of becomes, well, what it is. I can't believe we've gone 20 minutes on Young Guns 2. That's too much.
Yeah. Too much.
Let's call it a day. It's okay.
But there were still a few trails for the kind who'd be cold before they were tame. They called them the Wild Bunch. Pike had been a gentleman of principle. He still had a principle or two.
We're not getting rid of anybody. We're gonna stick together just like it used to be. When you side with a man, you stay with him, and if you can't do that, you're like some animal. You're finished.
Dutch had dug for gold. He gave up digging.
How many cases did you take from the train?
16 cases of rifles. We lost one on the trail.
He stole it.
Lo quiero vivo!
I want you to meet my fiancée.
So, Sam Peckinpah is, he didn't make a bunch of films, but for the most part, the films that he made had impact. He was largely finished his career by the time I got super into movies, so I backed into the world of Peckinpah. But I had seen The Wild Bunch and Straw Dogs when I was young. Straw Dogs was impenetrable to me. I didn't understand it, and in fact, it kind of made me feel kind of queasy and sick. I didn't know what I was looking at. I was not ready for it. Probably the same thing should have been true of The Wild Bunch, but I totally connected to The Wild Bunch. And it's one of the first movies I saw that had a quote-unquote unhappy ending, but it was still completely satisfying.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I didn't understand why it was satisfying other than just the huge scale and operatic violence that the last 20 minutes of this movie sort of deteriorates into. And again, I can't overstate, for the year this came out, this is 1969. This was unbelievably violent. This is not a Western where someone gets shot and they put their hand to their chest and fall to the ground silently. Blood spurts, people scream and twitch. They take round after round after round. And we are following a gang of criminals who are getting long in the tooth, and they're looking for their retirement. They're looking for their satisfaction. What is this thing that they've been after, this goal that they've been after? And to me, and this is me watching it today, the thing that they were after wasn't that one last big score. And it wasn't that ranch and the retirement and the family. What they were looking for was to go out in a blaze of glory on their own terms, by their own choice. That sounds insane, and it is insane, but that's what The Wild Bunch is to me. And I think it's amazing. I think it's an amazing movie. Again, I think that the Fistful of Dollars helped us get here as far as the badass, the violence starting to get escalated, and the anti-hero having darker and darker shades of gray. So where you get the feeling like, as much as these guys at the end of the movie are going back to rescue their buddy Angel, and that feels noble, these aren't noble men. These are criminals. And they're going to kill a bunch of other terrible people, and they're going to die in the process. Like, there are no winners, there are no losers, but it's as close to an act of redemption as these guys could ever hope to accomplish. Which is why most of them, most especially and memorably Ernest Borgnine, go into that final battle with huge shit-eating grins on their faces.
Yes.
The energy of that and just the idea of that is fucking Shakespearean. Okay? And
yes.
Like it's an incredibly wet, deep, violent movie. And some people just dismissed it as like pornographic violence because Peckinpah was known for just piling it on, not just the blood sprays, but in slow motion. Like you can't look away from it. He won't let you look away from it. These are violent people living violent lives that lead to violent deaths. And it's a 5 fucking star movie. That's where I start.
Yeah. I think that growing up and not seeing Westerns like The Wild Bunch, I had this kind of safe idea about what Westerns were, so I didn't appreciate them. And it was then discovering that there are darker Westerns where there are real consequences and each kill actually means something. That when I finally saw The Wild Bunch, I was like, where are the rest of the Sam Peckinpah movies? Line me up. I want to do an online festival of everything that he does. Because, if we have a Fistful of Dollars leads to The Wild Bunch, I think that very directly leads to what Tarantino has been able to accomplish with his career, but also his Westerns.
Yeah.
Because the blood flows in his movies as well. But there's a reason for it. And, these are not noble heroes in any way, shape, or form. I think I've only had... I should have watched this more than I have, but I've only watched it twice. First time it just completely, forgive the play on words here, but blew me away. And it's the stuff you're describing with the amount of blood, and I love that slow motion shot, It's kind of like in those great Kung Fu movies, you'll have that slow motion shots, but it just adds this impact, even if it's a secondary character or an extra in there that has some meaning. It was almost his signature shot, And I would agree with you, like Straw Dogs is an interesting one, but it does feel exploitative at points.
Yeah.
I don't get that vibe as much here from this film. I just think it's spectacular. The opening is unreal.
Yeah.
Basically destroying an entire town.
And the civilian casualties, too. I think that was relatively new because, it wasn't just the cops and robbers that were catching these bullets. There were a lot of people in the street getting trampled and getting shot. Yeah. Which would have really happened. I mean, Absolutely.
We see so many movies where all the, supposedly innocent... There are no innocent bystanders or, it's... the action movies, they'll shoot exactly like the rival gang or the villain or whatever. Here, there are real consequences for the violence from the beginning to the end. Spectacular train robbery. One of the best in film history. And here, if you like that aspect of Westerns, which sometimes, a lot of people like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I revisited it and reviewed it on my show.
Yep. And
it just didn't do as much for me as the first time I saw it. And it has several train robbery sequences, which are fine. They're quite well done. But none of them hold a candle to what what the Wild Bunch does.
Butch and Sundance is a bromance, though, whereas the Wild Bunch is carnage, right?
It's just total carnage.
What I love about the train job in the Wild Bunch is, other than the opening sequence shootout, this is where we get to see not just the gang doing their thing, but how good they are at it. How they execute that plan perfectly, and the few wrinkles that come up, they deal with on the fly effectively well. Like, in a way, it's almost too smoothly. Like, they are a well-oiled machine, these guys. They've been at it for a long time. They know what the fuck they're doing. They've been tasked to get their hands on this cache of guns by these evil Mexican army fellows. It's complicated. Bad people doing chores for bad people.
Yes.
So this is sort of the centerpiece action sequence, the train job, where we see how good these guys are, and in spite of ourselves, in spite of knowing how terrible we are, we kind of come to like them and love them a little bit just because of how well they do their jobs here.
I also like the lead up to that is brilliant because, one of the Wild Bunch is from Mexico, and he's from a village, and he was in love with this girl.
Angel, yeah.
Angel's the character, and then Ed was in love with this woman who is now basically a prostitute for the Generalissimo and his army, and he gets so upset and so passionate when he sees her walking to the general. He gets up and he can't help. He kills her right then and there.
Murders her.
He murders this woman because she's not innocent anymore and she's not with him, and creates just a shitstorm for these guys going forward, which kind of gets softened in a way, but not, because...
But again, it's not a heroic action. And does Angel maybe deserve to be tortured to death and, left behind and brutalized for all of that? Well...
He's behind a car, he gets dragged.
Yeah. It's brutal. Yeah. It's brutal. But again, he's a bad guy. He did do some bad things. And this is the world he was living in. But the rest of the gang can't sit with it. They can't live with it. And maybe in another time, maybe not that long ago, they could have rode away with their bounty and left him to his fate. But nope, they figured out that this was the thing that they were looking for. I know I've been focusing my energy on the last 20 minutes of the movie, but I just think it's so brilliant, like the way it's executed, especially the very, very start of the fight. They come back, they try to talk the guy into bringing their guy back, and he says no. Then they get a little bit more, they're back up a little bit about it, but I mean, they're completely outnumbered. It doesn't look like they have any cards to play. And I think the guy just gets pissed off that they're not taking him seriously. So he just cuts Angel's throat to end the debate.
Yeah.
And there's this pause. And the camera just glides over the crowd, over each of our characters, over like everybody. And the general is gunned down. And then another silence, because no one can fucking believe that just happened. And then Ernest Borgnine gets this huge smile on his face, and he starts laughing. And then they shoot down the top command guy at the table. And once that happens, it just turns into bedlam. And it is seriously 10 to 15 minutes of utter carnage. And that machine gun, a Gatling crank gun, and everything like that. But you can see them make the decision. They don't have to look to each other to say, should we do this? They never have the conversation, but they all agree that they're 100% in. And I don't know, it's somehow profound to me. I get it that it's just this bloodletting action shoot 'em up, but it gets me. Very rarely has that combination of sort of Kill Bill level violence actually been about something other than violence,
Yeah, it's so well directed. But it's an out of control sequence, and I guess he was a kind of out of control, kind of a wild human being, as I understand it. He appeared in some movie, I don't know which movie, in the late 70s, and I think they had to like dub his lines because he was drunk the entire time and he couldn't say his lines, but he appears in some movies as an actor. But he has control over the chaos of this extreme movie, and it is so well done. I wanted to mention William Holden.
Yep.
He's just an actor that I don't think he ever completely got his due. Like, the stuff he was in, his filmography is so impressive, but he was always kind of like the other guy. Like, there'd be somebody else to be a little bit flashier in the movie that would be considered for attention or even awards attention, and he was just solid throughout his career. And anytime he's in the movie, I'm in. I just love him, and he does such a great job of playing this, this aging gunfighter who needs to prove this to himself. And again, that Blaze of Glory goal, I think, is very much there. They claim it's about money, but it's not. And I totally believe him in every single moment. Like, the acting, not just all the shoot 'em ups and the violence and the style of it. There's some pretty good acting in this movie too.
I think the Holden thing is that his acting is a little bit invisible. I said a similar thing about Bill Paxton. Remember, like, he is sort of the king of making it look easy. Holden's never really flashy about it. He's never asking you to say, look at me, look at me, look at me. He's just 100% there for the character. And he would be a great member to your cast because he just seems like such a team player to me. It's not about this diva elbowing everybody out off the screen. It's doing the job, and he does the job every time. Yeah. I mainly know Holden from this movie, though. So,
like Bridge on the River Kwai.
Of course, yeah.
And Network is
right.
One of, I even reviewed. Was part of this huge ensemble cast for The Towering Inferno, which I reviewed on my show.
I barely remember that movie.
Yeah. There. He wasn't, maybe, again, not the flashiest person in the film. He doesn't have the flash of Steve McQueen or Paul Newman have in that, but he's just a solid presence in any movie he was in. I guess he kind of, he liked to drink a little bit too much, and I think that he was kind of a tragic last few years of his life there, where he was losing film projects left, right, and center. But in his time, he was just an absolutely amazing actor, and so yeah. I wish more people would check out his stuff.
And speaking of checking out their stuff, Sam Peckinpah. I mean, Straw Dogs is a controversial movie, and The Osterman Weekend is like not the most amazing send-off for a great director, but I mean, his movies are worth checking out. I do think we're talking about the high water mark for Sam Peckinpah right here with The Wild Bunch. But if you haven't seen it, check it out. Also, this is maybe a sub-note, but it's responsible for one of my all-time favorite Monty Python sketches.
That's right. That was so good. Yes.
There's from the original series, there's this garden party where there's a bunch of people sipping tea and playing the piano, and all of a sudden it just goes into this slow-motion, brutal violence thing that's 1,000% like shot for shot out of The Wild Bunch and Sam Peckinpah, and it is fucking hilarious.
It is. That's a brilliant sketch. Yeah.
For this reason and many others, I encourage you to check out The Wild Bunch. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, please do. Yeah,
Boom.
Sure.
This town, I really think it's like something out of the Bible.
What part of the Bible?
The part right before God gets angry.
Men wanted to be him.
You best hand over the gun, Phil. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to step over there and slap you around some.
Women wanted to love him.
I love you, Bill.
Right now, I love you too, Jane.
And outlaws wanted to be the one to kill the legend.
An awful lot of people want a piece of Wild Bill.
Wild Bill, I come here to kill you.
He wants me to show some color.
Don't do it, Bill!
Jeff Bridges.
I don't explain myself. Not to you, not to nobody.
Ellen Barkin.
The man that kills Wild Bill is gonna be awful famous.
John Hurt. Diane Lane. Keith Carradine. Christina Applegate. Bruce Dern. And David Arquette.
You said that you were a horse molester.
You say what horse?
In a film by Walter Hill.
Be seeing you around, Wild Bill.
Wild Bill. Take a walk on the wild side.
Okay, so Wild Bill, directed and written by Walter Hill and starring Jeff Bridges. You and I have a history with Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
I spoke with you an entire episode talking about the dude on your show. So I think you know that I come in a fan of Bridges. Walter Hill is one of these directors that I want to be a fan of. He's made some good movies, he's made some bad movies, but he's not dependable. I wish I could say that he was for the ones that are good. And he obviously likes the Western genre. He made this one and he made another, I think, kind of terrible proto-Western called Last Man Standing with Bruce Willis.
Right.
So, I mean, he's not necessarily stretching himself here. And this sort of presents itself as a biopic of Wild Bill Hickok. But what it ends up being, at least to me, is sort of like, not even the greatest hits, but Wild Bill's most violent hits. It's like in a hurry to rush through all of the shootouts that he was famously involved in and all of the, famous people that he interacted with in the most efficient way that Walter Hill can possibly get it out. It's like 96 minutes. And I think it wants to be maybe a little bit more of an epic. It's looking to be closer to Wyatt Earp than whatever it is here. Now, Wyatt Earp is not a great movie, and this is not a great movie. But somewhere in between the two, I think a great movie could have existed. I appreciate what they're going for as far as making a historical biopic move, like they don't want to meander and have you sit on the porch and sift into it. But I think the essential failure, and I have to call it that, of the movie is by the end of the movie I didn't feel like I knew Wild Bill. I knew that he killed a bunch of people and I knew the circumstances that led up to those people's deaths, but I didn't know why he was such a fundamentally violent drunk person. I didn't know who he was or, what made him tick, even a little bit. It's a series of gunfights, and there's some fine performances in here too. John Hurt sort of serves as our narrator and his best friend, and I have always had a super soft spot for Ellen Barkin. She can really bring the sexy when she wants to, and Calamity Jane is just this woman who's covered in dirt and muck and mud and has all of this nasty sass to her. But in spite of it, I find her super attractive. This movie also has, pleasingly, one of the least romantic sex scenes that I've ever seen. It's actually quite lovely in a way, how unromantic it is. But
yeah, I know what you're saying there.
So, it has moments where I'm into it, and there's things that I think it does quite well. I like the way the Native Americans are treated largely in the movie. And especially the first couple of times he does it, these sort of bleary opium flashbacks that Wild Bill has, where we get these canted, angled, black and white, sort of strange visual aesthetics to some of the storylines, just to give us a different visual energy to the movie periodically. I think he returns to that maybe more often than he should, but I like what he was going for. And in the end of the day, I think that's my feelings about Wild Bill. I really liked what they were going for. I don't think they closed the deal on it. I've actually been to Deadwood, the place where this movie takes place, or the bulk of it takes place, and been in the bar, presumably, or probably a rebuild of the bar the table he was sitting at, where he got shot in the back. And they have details up to what cards he was holding in his hands at the time. And here's something that the Deadwood tourist industry does that I think is more respectful than the movie. They didn't even name the man who pulled the trigger on him there. It's a historical site. But at the site, Wild Bill Hickok was shot in the back of the head by a coward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They spend a lot of time with David Arquette trying to give him a backstory as to why this happened, that there was a reason for him doing this other than anything of notoriety. And they also go a bunch of steps to make him a pathetic coward. And every minute of screen time they spend on him is fucking waste as far as you're concerned. We know where this is going. We don't like him. We're never supposed to like him. And I don't think he works as a character. I don't pity him. I don't like him. I don't care about him. So I don't even hate him. It's just like he's just another character who's got to serve as the guy who pulls the trigger at the end of the movie. It's inevitable. So I'm lukewarm on Wild Bill, but I want to be warm on it. Talk me down.
Well, I remember when it came out and I didn't get to see it, and I've had trouble finding this movie for years. I had to go to a digital place to get a hold of it, to rent it. And I'm an Oliver Stone fan.
Yep.
And Oliver Stone in the 90s, right? And so what that means is that, very kinetic editing and the mix of black and white photography with color photography. So when I would see some trailers for it, I'm like, this is the kind of visual style I really like when it came out in 1995. But I never got a chance to see it till now. Now I'm, a little bit more balanced. Like the visual look can't sort of win me over completely with the movie. But I think I do want to start off with the positive that the movie does look really good. And the black and white photography and those opium sequences you were talking about are unreal. I mean, it looks like digital photography, but it's not digital photography. It was a very unique style. I guess with Walter Hill, like he was a bit of a cowboy type, that's where he feels comfortable. He actually directed the pilot for the TV show Deadwood.
Oh, nice.
And won an Emmy for it. So it's like he returned to Deadwood, and it was almost maybe to make up for this movie, where I think he missed a lot of opportunities. Now, the other piece in here that I don't know maybe is a factor, it was based on a play.
Right.
Yeah. And I would suggest that the theater piece probably was expecting audience members to, or there would have been something in the program, know a bit more about Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane and all of these folks. But the movie would probably need something more, and it's a very, very strange opening to the film in many ways, because we just go through all these random events. They highlight the date, they highlight the location where it happened, and it was just like this, I don't know what, like 10-minute overview of his life that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with like the main story that's being told.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. In a more a TV miniseries or a more epic movie, 2-hour plus movie, maybe dare I say 3 hours, we could spend some time in each. A lot of them are very interesting aspects to his life, but we aren't given enough time to spend with this.
Hell, most of them could have been movies by themselves.
Probably. Or episodes. Again, I think that long-form television piece is a good approach for something like this. We spend way too much time with David Arquette, who, when he showed up, I couldn't help, even though it was years before this, but I was like, oh, now Dewey's showing up. So, it was, he couldn't really get out of that for me.
The movie forgets it's about Wild Bill Hickok every time he's on screen for some reason.
Yeah. I don't know if... And Arquette is okay. I'm not an enormous fan. Like, there's good, bad, and ugly in his filmography there.
The problem with the part was not Arquette, I will say. I don't think...
I suppose so, but I guess we're supposed to be sort of annoyed by him. It's kind of like the Emilio Estevez thing. I was just like, can we get away from him and spend time with some of the others? Even Christina Applegate is pretty good as this prostitute who kind of humors Arquette. She's way more interesting. Her introduction, she comes in and she just randomly shoots somebody who's
the ear, yeah.
And we don't see anything like that again. And it's like, what's the story with this woman? Like, her story would be much more compelling than anything we're getting from these subplots.
Well, speaking of the subplots, there was one of the many quick slapdash shootouts that they show us to in this date, in this place. While Bill is sort of flustered, he's sort of bullied into a gunfight, and somebody startles him from behind, and he spins and shoots and kills one of his own deputies.
Yes.
Now, if we knew who that deputy was and what their relationship was, and if we didn't immediately jump to several years later to see the immediate reaction from Wild Bill, that would have mattered. He killed a deputy, one of his friends, presumably, it was a mistake. Clearly it was accidental, but what were the repercussions of that? How did Bill react? No, we're moving on to the next scene, and as far as the movie's concerned, it doesn't matter what his reaction is. There was violence. You didn't want to not see that violence, but we're not going to stick around to deal with the repercussions.
One of the better sequences of that ilk, but they do spend a little bit more time on it, is the sequence with Bruce Dern.
Yes.
And he was, I guess, a member of this gang or whatever, and they tried to ambush Bill, and Bill ended up shooting
his brother.
His brother was, right? And so then, like, Bruce Dern, I don't know why he always looks old.
He's looked old since the 70s.
Yeah, pretty much, like, Coming Home and, like, movies like that. But anyway, he's this old man in a wheelchair. It's, like, set out in the middle of, I don't even know if it was in Deadwood. It was some location. And then calls Bill out for this shootout, which is going to end predictably. But there's just something about that extended cameo by Bruce Dern that gave the film some life.
It was hard not to think of the Hateful Eight during that sequence too, actually.
Yeah. Well, and even Once Upon a Time in Hollywood I thought of, because Bruce Dern has kind of this one scene role there too. He just makes a meal out of some secondary character every time.
Bruce Dern's not always in good movies, but he's always good in...
Yes. Yeah. So Ellen Barkin, yeah, I agree. She's very attractive, and I cheer for her. And I want to. I haven't watched this TV show she's in, which is the American version of Animal Kingdom, but I've always liked her. Unfortunately, I kept thinking that she was miscast as Calamity Jane.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. I was distracted by it. I think she might have even been good in the Diane Lane role, and maybe Diane Lane as Calamity Jane, but I just kept thinking, this is, and maybe she wanted to stretch herself and do something different, and that's perfectly fine. But she has nice moments, but it's.
I liked how rough and dirty she was. You know what I mean?
Calamity Jane, like Calamity Jane, but she seems to be missing. Like what a big mistake is. Calamity Jane was a Western hero and almost like a feminist Western hero herself, but to watch this film and this particular version, she spends most of her time is, why doesn't Wild Bill love me? Like, he loves Diane Lane and
here's where I guess I'll disagree on. Here's where I'll disagree on the performance. I get what you're saying, is, and she's so tough she shouldn't be whittled down by things like love. But her love is mixed with anger, because I think she kind of hates herself for how much she loves Bill, because it's out of character for her. So she gets weirdly pissed off about it. She genuinely loves Bill, and that, in a way, makes Bill able to get to her in a way no one else in the world can.
Yeah.
So it makes her fragile. It makes her, quote-unquote, a girl, and she hates that.
But we don't get to see a whole lot of the other side of her as the gunfighter, and there's a quick introduction, but it's not really all that much. Like, she get towards the climax, and when she's running and she's like getting the guns and giving them to Bill. But I just think there was a bit of a disservice to the Calamity Jane character, who I think could have a really interesting movie. Okay. I was distracted by Barkin in the role for some reason. Well, I like Diane Lane. I always liked Diane Lane, and
she's safe bet usually. Yeah,
the flashback sequences and kind of her arc, that was an interesting enough story. It's unfortunate, and it does have a purpose connected to David Arquette's part of the story, but that was so much more compelling than the main story. It was just kind of a sloppy rendering. And I guess it probably comes from the play of led up to Wild Bill being shot in the back there. We haven't talked a lot about Jeff Bridges.
Well, I was just going to say, and I think that's telling. Jeff Bridges is a really good actor, but I don't know that I felt he inhabited this role. I think the problem is, like I said, the script, because usually he's just asked to shoot somebody. He's typically responding, and we don't get to know Bill. We just see him reacting to these situations, but we don't access him. I think he's trying, but I think he might be a little bit hobbled by the script. I guess I can say he looks the part. I don't think that Jeff Bridges is capable of making a completely uninteresting performance, but I can't say that he knocked it out of the park. I can't say that it was an amazing performance. Like, you watch him in another Western like True Grit, that's a fucking amazing performance, right?
Exactly.
So it's not bad, but he is the center of the movie, and it's adequate. And I usually am much more enthusiastic about Jeff Bridges than saying adequate. So I think that's telling as well.
From reading the trivia behind the movie, I get the sense that Walter Hill's style and Bridges' style clashed. Walter Hill only wanted to do 1 or 2 takes and wanted to move on. Bridges asks to do several takes, and he wants to try different things each time and kind of experiment with it a little bit. And Walter Hill didn't like that.
Right.
And so I wonder if some of the stuff that Bridges wanted to do was kind of either cut off or shot down, or could have been a victim of editing as well.
And again, I don't want to talk shit about Bridges. This is not what I was trying to do, but he's the main character of the movie, and it was part of the draw of the movie, frankly. Jeff Bridges as Wild Bill Hickok. And in a way, we spent 15 and 16 minutes talking about it, and we've just got around to talking about Jeff Bridges. That says something.
I will say, though, I thought I can understand why he took the role, because he gets to be, roll around with Diane Lane in bed, and he gets to be in this tub completely naked with Ellen Barkin.
And again, that sex scene in the bar.
But that's such an awkward. And I was just, I can't believe I didn't see it coming. I should have seen it coming, but what a blue balling moment that is when we get to that. When we get to that.
Yeah, you're right in the middle of something, you guys. Do we need to do this now? But the blue balls is a good metaphor for how I feel about the movie overall. Because, I wanted to be blown away by it, and I just wasn't. It didn't get me there. Good enough?
Yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Hey, fellas, I don't think this bum knows where he is.
They call this place Valley of Violence. Why don't you back up before you find out why?
You talk too much.
Don't worry, everyone. You are gonna see a fight.
Oh, I love a good fight.
You gonna face me like a man or what?
You started this.
I'm gonna finish it, too.
Oh, he just spit on him. He just spit on Gilly.
I am the marshal here in Denton, and I can't have people thinking this kind of business goes on around here. So you find yourself another town, far away from here.
We gotta keep our heads down, okay?
He can't get away with this. He almost took your head off.
I'm gonna end it, and I'm gonna prove to him what I am capable of.
No. You're making a mistake.
You should have never come up against me.
That's a long way down.
Okay. In a valley of violence. Here we are, Dubray, once again talking about Ty West. In this case, the writer, director, and editor of In a Valley of Violence. And complete sort of change of tone in some ways from, his typical horror fare. He did The House of the Devil, he did The Innkeepers, and he did The Sacrament. He did some other things too, but those three in particular I think are very fine genre horror entries. And Cabin Fever 2, if you must, and The Roost. He's done other things. In a Valley of Violence, in a weird way, does stay true to the Ty West formula to a degree in his focus on character and his willingness to take his time with things, in a way, it is a very complete package movie, revenge movie by itself. But it could almost play as a series of like short vignettes and films. There's this story about this badass Ethan Hawke who shows up in this town with his dog, and he gets bullied by this marshal's son, James Ransone. And James Ransone plays such a fucking son of a bitch in this movie. He's such an asshole. He's a good actor. That you see him in like the second season of The Wire, and he was in the It Chapter 2. He's been around, and he's got this most punchable delivery in this movie. Like, you dislike him right away, and he keeps on giving you reasons to dislike him more. But it's funny because, like, we just talked about Wild Bill, and we see scene after scene where Wild Bill is goaded into gunfire in about 30 seconds. This lambasting, this like yelling and drawing him out of the bar seems to just go on and on and on, and is drawn out in this weird, typically Thai West way. So when he finally gets laid out, it is so dramatically satisfying. You're just like, yes. And strangely, when Ethan Hawke actually spits on him, I laughed out loud at the sheer audacity and darkness of the movie. And this is just sort of the instigating action of the movie. Him punching out this marshal's son starts a domino effect that leads to a lot of badness. Here's another reason the movie totally works for me. I am a dog person. Okay?
Yes. Yeah, I'm just gonna get to that.
This movie makes you like, Ethan Hawke is basically playing the tough ass stranger who shows up in the town. He might as well be the man with no name, but he's got a dog, and he fucking loves that dog, and because of that, we love the dog. And because it's a Western, we know that dog is gonna die, and because it's a Western, that dog does die. And because of that, more so than it, like, we've seen, we're going to talk about a Western later about a guy's whole family gets wiped out, and we got to be on side with him. I am so on board with this vengeance. It's kind of ridiculous. And he was willing to take it. He was willing to walk away. He was willing to let all of this other bullshit go. But they killed his dog. So now people gotta die. It is a very, very simple, straightforward revenge story, but it is told with a lot of style and a sneaky amount of humor. It is brutally violent too. Like, the tones shouldn't work, but maybe it's because I come in as a Thai West fan, or maybe it's just I don't know, just because, like I said, I'm such a dog person that it hit me personal that I needed to see this vengeance dealt out, and I was gonna be cheering for it. But I really, really like this movie. It's obviously very, like, intentionally retro from its title sequences and everything like that. It's very conscious of the Westerns that came before it. But it is successfully, I think, in its own way, its own thing. And also, one more thing before I hand it over to you. The first time in years and years I have seen John Travolta in a movie where not only do I say he didn't suck, I say he's actually really good in this movie. It's been a while, Mr. Travolta, but thank you. I'm a big fan of In a Valley of Violence, but I am willing to hear a second opinion.
Well, you've pretty much taken all of my notes right there.
Oh, did I? Okay.
I will say, like, I've become a Thai West fan now because of last time I was on the show reviewing The Sacrament.
Yeah.
I don't like In a Valley of Violence as much as The Sacrament.
Okay.
Sacrament just still... thinking about it just chills me to my bones. You know, one of the other things that, as far as like drawing him out to this gunfight, so that this, this jerk can like show what a great gunfighter he is. After all this taunting and bullying, the reason that Hawke leaves is because he's going to go after his dog.
Yep.
That's why he comes out and deals with him that way. What I like about a lot of this is what I like about the film is there's a little bit, with the exception of one character in particular, there's some complexity, and I'm glad you mentioned Travolta. Again, it was just like, yes, he must be way more invested in this movie than a lot of the stuff he's been doing lately, or maybe you recognize that it's a really good screenplay and a good opportunity, but he's actually not a bad character. Like, I thought he was going to be like the two-dimensional villain of the piece, and no, he has some complexity. He recognizes his son's an idiot,
yeah,
right? And he's trying to find ways to get rid of this guy who's embarrassed his son, you know, and banning him from the town and all that, and just trying to deal with the situation. But he has no control over his son, who then rounds up, you know, a bunch of the officers and goes chasing after Hawk, which leads to it's a terrible sequence involving the dog. So that was like a horrific Ty West moment, and like that whole sequence is like, I would dare anybody, even the kindest-hearted person who doesn't believe in the death penalty or violence or anything, you're going to want these people to suffer.
Like, you thought John Wick was bad? John Wick spared us, really.
Yes. So that all works. You kind of highlighted the performance that doesn't work for me, unfortunately, and you can make an argument that maybe he was just so good at being this jerk that's why I'm reacting this way. But I just found, Ransone just so over the top, beginning to end, when everybody else seems to be kind of layering their performances with a certain amount of realism. I guess Karen Gillian, when we first see her, she's from Doctor Who and all of that stuff, who plays his wife. The first time I saw the two of them, I was like, this feels like the acting Olympics between these two, and it was just too much. Her performance calmed down, but he like stayed way over the top through the whole thing and was distracting me. And it was kind of, to me, I feel the weak link of the picture. I mean, we're not supposed to like him, but I think there would be a way to get to that point without it being like as actory and as showy as it appears. When Hawk is so subtle, and Travolta, who's an over-actor supreme, he's playing it pretty subtle too in this film.
Yeah. You wouldn't expect Travolta to fit comfortably in this world, and he totally does. I think what you might be connecting to, I like Ransone as an actor. I didn't necessarily think he was overplaying it, but I think his character is the one character in the entire movie without dimension.
Yes.
That might be a writing flaw, but it also might be deliberate. There is nothing to him except for a petulant bully. He's basically a spoiled rich kid. His dad has run the town his whole life, and he's, never been punished, ever, for anything he's done. There's never been any repercussions to him, and there's no dimension to him. The bad guys all have dimension to him. The one character who decides, he wants people to address him by his name. My name is Lawrence. Or
whatever.
Yeah, drawing the line. We could see him. There's another one of the guys who knows this is all stupid, and he tells, he doesn't want to be involved with killing the dog or killing this guy. He knows it's dumb, and he's got dimension. He's sort of dragged into it, and he has to face the repercussions, whether he wanted to be involved or not. That gives us layers.
That's a great
Karen Gillan character, she's hard to read at first until we understand that she's recently discovered that she's pregnant. I think, to me, that made her emotional ups and downs make more sense, because she's realizing that her life is going to change monumentally, and she's realizing just how terrible the man that she's with is. And she has to be supportive of him. She has to be with him because they're a family now.
But I don't buy that it was this incident and this day that she clued into that.
Right.
Like, the way that this guy operates, this would not be a surprise. The fact that she, all of a sudden, it wasn't really until he hit her. Like, he hits his pregnant wife.
Yeah.
And
before he knows she's pregnant, I think he does that, though, right?
Is it after that? I think she reveals it after he's. But I don't know. It's picky because I really do like this movie a lot, but some of the stuff that was so creepy and real and uncomfortable in the sacrament is not as much here, and maybe it's not fair to compare two movies that are totally different, and one that's being done as a faux documentary type of thing.
The faux found footage reality of this movie is a maybe not a romantic Western, but it's a stylized Western, you know.
Yeah.
So we have more separation from it. I also wanted to mention Larry Fessenden. He plays one of the guys who's more into the idea of killing Ethan and the dog. And he has a very, very grisly death in a bathtub in this movie. And I will say, fair warning, I mean, all the movies we've talked about have been violence, but there are some surprising bursts of real gore in this movie. And if that's going to be a problem for you, fair warning.
That's where the horror movie director showed up, was that scene.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to go back to Travolta, because I wouldn't have thought that Travolta would have fit comfortably into this world. And in a way, when I heard about this movie coming down the pipes, I mean, I was sold with written and directed by Ty West, but my only real reservation was John Travolta. And it's not even that I hate John Travolta. He's been great in movies. It's just been a real long time since I felt like either he was invested in a movie or that he was in a movie worth him or anyone's time. This is that movie. Like, if you're a Travolta fan and you want to see some redemption in him as an actor, check out this movie. And if you're not a Travolta fan, do not let his presence dissuade you.
No.
He has a love-hate thing with his son, because he kind of hates what a piece of shit his son is, but he loves him because it's his son. And it's a tough row to hoe for him. Like, he's not necessarily what you call, like, the white hat good guy of the picture, but his motivations are at least understandable. Yeah. And it's nuanced. And there's lots of little details about the character, too. His weird limp that he has, and his interaction with the other boys. The fact that everybody is more scared of him than they are of Ransone. Like, they have no respect or fear for Ransone. They're just worried that if they get mad at him, his old man's going to come down on him. Like, the real authority in the town is Travolta, and he surprisingly carries it well. The other thing I'll say is Ethan Hawke, who's been doing more Westerns lately. He fits into the milieu quite nicely. I mean, Clint Eastwood is always going to be a tough act to follow, and this is the type of role that Clint Eastwood would have, but I think he does the job. It's not flashy, and again, I was just sort of being lukewarm on Jeff Bridges in the Wild Bill movie for maybe underplaying things, but this movie is calling for that. We have to cheer for him. I think, like I said at the beginning, the dog does a lot of the work for us, but Ethan Hawke is there for me in this movie, and again, Ethan Hawke is just a strangely dependable actor. Again, not always in great movies, but rarely do I think he sucks in a movie, you know?
And he really has some grit in this performance. I liked him. Like, I was interested how it would go, in him and Travolta in particular. But yeah, beginning to end, like, he won me over in the first moments of his performance, and that didn't stop until, you know, throughout, right till the end. A couple more things I want to say, like, again, spoilers, but Travolta's demise is epic.
Yep. Riddled
maybe
with
a
bullets.
touch comedic in some dark way, but what happens, I don't think I've seen something quite like that in a Western before, and as you said, it's a very predictable genre, but what happens there, it was really interesting. So, you know, I'm spoiling it for those who haven't seen it, that he dies, but the journey to get to that point is really interesting.
Well,
I wanted to mention an actor. I don't know if I'm the only person who's a fan of this person, but I always like seeing her and stuff. That Tassia Farmiga.
I haven't seen her in a lot, but I thought she was fine in here. Yeah.
Yeah, she plays Marianne, and she wants out of this town. She kind of sees Ethan Hawke as a vehicle for that, and there's a little bit of, it's a love story subplot, but it's kind of done in a clever way. They acknowledge the age difference. Like, Ethan Hawke actually says, like, you know, she could be my daughter at one point. And he's got his baggage connected to his past as far as that stuff. I like how that all plays out, but I like her scenes because he's so quiet and understated, but then she's so verbose and so energetic, and she's, you know, so interested in him, and is like a really good person who's kind of stuck in this terrible situation. So I think she could get lost in the mix there, but I love her. She's been in a lot of the seasons of American Horror Story, and she's, to me, always been kind of good in that show too. Vera Farmiga's sister, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Closest thing to like a criticism to, I think the town feels underpopulated. It really, it does feel like these are the only 8 people in the town. It doesn't have a lived-in quality. That might be a budgetary thing. There's also a notable lack of horses present for a Western film. And again, these are quibbles. I mean, I feel like I've been sort of pushing. I'm a fan of the director, and I like that he jumped genres. He's kind of been doing a lot more TV work. I don't know when we're going to get another Ty West picture, but sign me up. I like what this guy does, and usually, I like to say that I like genre directors who stick with their genre. Who I'm okay with making a horror movie every few years for the rest of my life. I don't feel the need to prove myself, and as a serious quote unquote filmmaker. I say if you make a good horror movie, you are a serious filmmaker.
You are.
But this convinces me that Ty West could probably work in any genre that he felt passionate about. So if it's got his name on it, I'm going to be there.
And I'll defend the town thing. I don't think the town in Fistful of Dollars is that populated either. It's just the members of the 2 gangs and then the 3 people who are in between the 2.
There's more people just that we see on screen, but again, all of them play a role in the plot. There's no superfluous dude who works at the corner store or anything like that for some reason. There's no family of farmers that live on the edge of town that we get to see or anything like that. It's just a sheriff and 2 prostitutes and 3 hired guns, and that's it, is what it feels like. But again, it's a small complaint. I don't mean to be real about it. Is there anything else you want to say about A Valley of Violence?
No, I enjoyed it. Maybe my expectations based on The Sacrament were a little bit high, and you had been telling me how great it was too. So I think I'll revisit it again, and hopefully I'll be a little bit more positive. It's not that I'm not positive, but I'm not, willing to, give my bank account away on this one.
Fair enough.
Get out of the way, woman! Whenever I get to liking someone, they ain't around long.
I notice when you get to disliking someone, they ain't around for long either.
Well, the one that everyone's so scared of, Al. Yeah.
We got the Josie Wales, Abe. We got reward money coming.
You're wanted, Wales.
You a bounty hunter?
Man, he's got to do something for a living these days.
Dying ain't much of a living, boy.
He was out for revenge, and they were out for his blood. And when you're an outlaw, there's no turning back.
You're all alone now, Wales.
Not quite alone.
He lives by the gun. He lives by his word. And he lives for revenge. He's an army of one. Clint Eastwood is the outlaw Josie Wales.
All right, we started with a Clint Eastwood picture. We're going to finish with a Clint Eastwood picture. This one he actually directed as well when the original director was fired, something like 8 days into production. The outlaw Josie Wales. Again, this was 1976. The popularity of the Western was officially over. It seemed weirdly late in the game for them to be doing another Clint Eastwood Western. This is more the entering towards the Dirty Harry phase, the gritty cop drama of the 70s sort of taking over. But no, they're going to do this movie, and then Clint Eastwood, who'd already, I think he directed 2 movies before this, so he'd already sort of proven that he was able to direct a movie, decided, they're firing the director, he can sort of take over directing this thing. And he's been in a lot of westerns. Like, even by 76, he'd been more than around this block a few times. So, and he'd worked with brilliant directors. So why couldn't he do a really great job? It's a very celebrated western, this Outlaw Josie Wales, and it is very, very beautifully photographed, and there's a lot of good acting in it. And once again, like we've talked about throughout these western movies, it's a fairly straightforward revenge western. And it's sort of, I think, legitimized, at least to some people, the people who saw the movie anyway, Clint Eastwood as Clint Eastwood the director, not just Clint Eastwood the actor. And a lot of people who really appreciate the western hold this one up to a high bar. To me, The Outlaw Josie Wales is the movie that is being commented on in Unforgiven. Or probably more so A Fistful of Dollars. This guy's a little bit more motivated because his entire family is killed. But this celebration of badassery and bloody vengeance as being a form of straight entertainment. I think what Josie Wales does is elevate it. Instead of just being another western, this is a very well photographed, very, prestige, well-written, well-executed Oscar bait western. It's not just another western. It's doing the same thing that every other western does, but it's doing it in that big, look-at-me, polished kind of way. And people weren't used to seeing that in a western, and that sort of made it pop and stand out. I mean, not since, like, The Searchers or, some of the great old John Wayne westerns had something been really, really mounted with such energy and scale in the western genre. A lot of times they're just like, how can we shoot a quick cheap shoot 'em up, and get her done. So all of the presentation of it is sort of helped to elevate the picture to maybe I think a little bit more than it is at the end of the day. It's another completely watchable, enjoyable Clint Eastwood revenge picture. But that's all. I think it's a 3.5-star movie, and it got 5-star treatment. Right? It's a very enjoyable, very handsomely mounted, well done revenge story, like many, many others. I think I'm more impressed almost away with the directing than I am with the acting, and I think maybe because he's doing double duty, Josie comes a little bit softer as a portrayal than we even usually get from the stoic Clint Eastwood. He has some good scenes early in the movie when he's first lost his family, when we see real emotion on him. But for the rest of the movie, he's Clint Eastwood. It wasn't until like I said, later in his career when he started commenting on this, and he sort of started taking it apart and satirizing it. So at the time this movie came out, it was a very modern western, and it feels less modern watching it through today's eyes. I liked it, but I felt like I was supposed to love it. That's where I start.
Yeah, I get all your points on that one. I think, and in terms of, was High Plains Drifter before this?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think High Plains Drifter and then Play Misty for me were his directorial, and they each had a little bit of a comment on their protagonist characters, and wasn't quite as simple. I think this has a historical context in many ways because of the Civil War idea. He's of course, a Confederate. He lives in the South, and it's the Union soldiers that come in and kill his family at the beginning.
It does come off as sympathetic to the South, does it not? Yes.
It does, which is really kind of interesting. And just portraying the Union soldiers as
monsters.
Not square dealing, like there's a surrender situation there, which is just an ambush, which adds to Josie Wales' hatred for the one soldier in particular, but basically that whole army. And then he just goes through and he starts to have this reputation. We get a little bit of a comment on the media, making him out to exaggerating what kind of a killer he is and how bad he is. I think, I wrote a ton of notes for some reason on this. It's a longer movie, I think, and maybe that's perhaps why I was writing tons of notes. I want to say, Chief Dan George is just a welcome presence. little big man. He was fantastic in that movie.
And he was in his late 70s doing this movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He couldn't remember lines, so Eastwood had a bit of a method to work with him a little bit, and then kind of got him to like work on his lines, but then improvise on the day of shooting, and then they just kind of worked with it. But you wouldn't necessarily know it, and like he's just a wonderful character as being kind of the sidekick on this journey. And I also like the other Indigenous woman there who comes along and out tricks Chief Dan George kind of early in the film there. And I also like the fact in this film, which was kind of unusual still for 76, I think they were trying to make progress, but we do have a tribe of Indians, American Indians, who are viewed as villains and dangerous. And then Josie Wales goes and meets with was it Sitting Bull or I'm trying to remember. Ten Bears. Sorry, excuse me, 10 Bears. And they have this conversation, and they realize they have a common enemy, right? And that they are more alike, and that they have a little bit of a truce. And in fact, like, cut their hands and exchange blood. The 10 Bears is played by the guy who was the chief in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from the year before. There just seemed to be layers of respect, so it wasn't a simple cowboy and Indian narrative like we had time and time again.
Again, I was watching this with modern eyes, so it's probably not the case. But I felt like it was almost an apology for the fact that we were dealing with this Confederate, sympathizing with the Confederate soldiers here. I think that it would have been helpful. I guess in the book this is more clear. Clint Eastwood's character is not involved in either way. He's in the South. He's with the South because he lives in the South, and that's the way a lot of people were. Like, I live here, so I guess I'm with the South, right? Like they don't have a newspaper to read or an internet feed to follow. They just know there's a war going on, and the South is one side, North is the other, and he's just a farmer who's living there. These guys, it's towards the end of the Civil War, and they're like ransacking places as spoils of war. But he doesn't have a particular position in any of this. But that's never made clear. We don't get to know him before his family is killed. The first thing we see in the movie is his family is killed and he hates these guys and he's motivated to get them. And it doesn't necessarily matter. I get that atrocities happen on both sides, and, you know, saying that one team is good or one team is bad, whatever. The motivations, it's all gray when you get to the blood and thunder of war, I guess. But it did feel strange that we were taking this perspective on it, and it felt to me almost like an apology how respectful and cool. He becomes blood brothers with an Indian, right? Yes. And if you were willing to go to war to stop people with black skin from being considered, you know, nothing other than a slave, that would be incongruous. So it would have been helpful to know Josie a little bit before this all happened. But it's a typical Western, and it was already 2.5 hours long, and it just wants to function as your sort of standard, like I say, revenge picture. It's just letting everything breathe, and it's being really sort of grand about the presentation. And that all works. I keep on feeling like I'm sounding more negative than I mean to. I just think it wants to be an Unforgiven, and it's not quite an Unforgiven.
No, it's not. No, I would never say that. But simply his reason for going after these soldiers is revenge for killing his only child and his wife.
Yeah.
I mean, and then it becomes a bigger deal when he becomes a fugitive from the law and he keeps collecting all these people. There's a very obvious theme of loneliness and learning that you actually need a community, and the big gunfight, typically Eastwood would take on everybody by himself, takes on a different angle because of all of these people he's encountered who end up traveling with him. There's a mangy dog, and then there's this old man, and then
in his quest to avenge his family, in his quest to avenge his family, he collects a new family almost unknowingly. I got it.
Yeah, it's heavy-handed, but on the whole, it works. But you're right. There's something in there where I'm not necessarily as excited about this one as I should be, but I still like it a lot. I would never dissuade somebody from seeing it. Fun cameo, Richard Farnsworth shows
Always
up.
good to see.
Yeah, he's barely in it, and he's part of their this, and it's somewhat entitled rich family, like this grandmother and her husband, and they're trapped, but they get ransacked by these scavengers, and he's one of them that Eastwood deals with when he comes across these people later on, who leads to some of the relationships there. What did you think of? I'm trying to remember her name, Sandra Locke, who I think this was the first film that she did with Eastwood. They did end up having a relationship here, and so she plays this woman that's described as a little bit dim at some point, but
I would say she's the least essential ingredient of the movie in a lot of ways. I guess it's nice to see a different face and get a female perspective here and there, but there was a lot of fat on this movie already, you know? Mm-hmm. One of the things is we keep saying it's 136 minutes, so I guess that's not like crazy long, but you feel the length of this one more. Like The Wild Bunch is 2.5 hours, and it's a cool breeze. It just comes right through, as far as I'm concerned.
I didn't feel that at all. It's 2.5 hours. Like, I still can't feel it.
This one you feel it, but I mean it's deliberate with its pace. It's not accidentally dragging its feet. Yeah. Again, I like it. I don't love it. This is one of those ones where I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to just anyone, but if you're a fan of the form, absolutely.
Yeah, if you're a fan of Clint Eastwood and westerns, in some ways it feels like the most traditional of the ones that we are talking about, though.
Yeah.
You know. Not that it's bland, it's just, you're right, there are some sequences which drag a little bit. Maybe it was, again, the directing by Eastwood, and he inherited the project too.
Yeah.
From Philip Kaufman, who wrote the screenplay and got fired. Apparently, it led to a unique rule with the Directors Guild of America, because then Eastwood took credit for the film, and they put a clause in there so that no star of a movie could end up taking over the direction of it and receiving credit. So I know for a fact that like Kevin Costner took over some of Kevin Reynolds' films, and famously Edward Norton kind of took over American History X.
But they don't get credit.
They don't get the credit in the end as being the directors of those films.
Well, that's interesting, because I think Philip Kaufman is a very interesting filmmaker. I wonder what the differences would have been, and I wonder why he was fired. I love his Body Snatchers, and I think The Right Stuff was one of the most underrated movies of the 80s.
Yes.
So,
it's a mystery to me. Somebody must have been getting along with somebody else on set. It could have been Eastwood and Kaufman weren't getting along, and they're like, okay, this is a Western starring Clint Eastwood. We can't sell any Westerns at this time, so the star is not replaceable, but the director is.
This is already not a popular project, so don't make too much noise, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Good enough?
Good enough. I struggled with this list more than I thought I would.
Well, it's a tough bunch of movies. Like, I mean, I even the two that I'm not as hot on in the list, I don't have it like. I'm not mad at any of these movies. I didn't feel like my time was wasted. I wasn't like, why did I put myself, let alone anyone else, through this movie? So that's nice. That's nice to have. I've been doing a few episodes lately where there's been some tough watches. So this was a nice palate cleanser. Thanks for being here, Jason. I would love to know, what was your least favorite of these 6 Westerns and why?
Yeah, I feel like maybe I was not in the right space to see it for some reason, but Young Guns 2 just did not completely do it for me. I feel like I do this every show. I plan to revisit it and see if I have a different opinion in a little bit, but for today, that's the bottom.
Well, that's too bad, because you actually ordered a fresh, hot copy of that to watch. You could have just borrowed mine, dude.
Yeah, but I'm going to use it on my podcast someday, you know, and those who have listened to this might be able to predict then how that show is going to go. But
or maybe you'll watch it again and it'll be the most amazing Western you've ever seen.
I'll be like, what was I on that week when I was... Because I watched all these fairly close to each other, as well as Young Guns. So it was kind of 7 in a few days here, which I'm starting to do with your show a little bit so that I'm not having stretches of time between here. So number 5 for me is Wild Bill. I really want to like it, but it's not... there. I think Walter Hill was big on style, but the script certainly needed a lot more work. Number 4 this is one where I feel like it's a bit low, but In a Valley of Violence ended up 4th for me. There was a performance I wasn't as thrilled with, and I don't know. It's like goes back to your question about like the older Westerns versus the new ones, and how I feel about them. Like, I mean, I love some modern Westerns, and we've talked about True Grit. The Coen brothers directed True Grit, which is a masterpiece, and I love Django Unchained and movies like that. This one, there's a lot more to like than dislike, but I was struggling with the top 4, as I said from the start. Number 3, The Outlaw of Josie Wales. I still really like the acting. I like the scope of it. It does appeal to probably more the traditional type of Clint Eastwood Western. I think the stakes are high enough. There's a message in it. The climax isn't as... Some things might be predictable, but it isn't like the man in the town shooting all the bad guys down and then making people safe and then wandering out of the town. Like, he, in fact, ends up... Spoilers for the end, but he stays in the town where all of this happens, and actually finds a place at the end of this. Number 2, 1 and 2 are so close, and I know what you're going to do with this, but I had to go with the Wild Bunch this time. I thought Wild Bunch was going to be a hands down number 1, but I had such a great time with A Fistful of Dollars, and I've just watched it over and over again, and there's some inexplicable charm to that film that I can't get past. It's solid for me. Versus the Wild Bunch, I think I had this memory of it being like this bloodbath, which it is, no doubt, but somehow the violence seemed safer than the first time I saw it, because maybe I was just completely unprepared for what the Wild Bunch would be. This time I memories of it, and it's a bit calmer than that.
Sorry, you glitched out there just for a second. Could you repeat that, brother?
Yeah, just I think my memory was like a Tarantino level bloodbath.
Right.
And there's still plenty of violence there, but there's also huge sections of time where that's not happening, and it's kind of a build up to it. And I think, it's not that I didn't enjoy it this time, and the last 20 minutes are unbelievable. Just the last 20 minutes was nearly the thing that made me switch it to first, and I was really battling between those two. But on this day, at this particular time, at this stage in my life, The Wild Bunch is number 2, and A Fistful of Dollars is number 1, and I love them both. It was just really, really tight, really close for me.
But look, that's a good list. I respect that list. It's a different list. It's a different list than my list. Look, we're not going to fight over this. It's really close. If you take the bottom two, the middle two, and the top two, they're the same for us, right?
Yeah.
At the bottom, Young Guns 2, yes, agreed. I admit that I have some personal nostalgia attached to this, especially the first Young Guns, but as just sort of like holdover, Young Guns 2 is attached to it as well. It's not as fun as Young Guns to me. It does have its problems, but if you want to see, the Brat Pack 90s Western, this is it. And it's better than that description would sound, while not being particularly great. And again, old Emilio. Ugh. Old Emilio is not working for me.
Why don't we get Martin Sheen? Because they look alike. Have Martin Sheen play that role. I guess he wasn't that old at that point, too. That would have made it much.
Well, I would have thrown away that whole aspect of the script, personally.
Yeah.
With no joy, I put Walter Hill's Wild Bill in 5th position. I like Walter Hill, even though he's made shitty movies, and I really like Jeff Bridges, but this is not his finest hour. It has moments where you can see the good movie that it could have been, but it's just not quite there. Those are the two ones that I come closest to, not recommending, or only recommending if you're an enthusiast of the Western genre. Okay, for the rest of the movies I'm talking about, they're recommendations.
Yeah.
I feel like the Outlaw Josie Whale is supposed to be higher on the list, but I put it in 4th place. I think it's just really good instead of amazing or like one of the greatest Westerns ever made. I don't think that's an insult to say that's a really good Western, like it does the job, absolutely, and it's really well executed. There's nothing rough around the edges about it at all as far as its execution, and it really sort of, I think, solidified Clint Eastwood, the director. So there's lots of reasons to like the Outlaw Josie Wales. I just happen to enjoy In a Valley of Violence more. I have this fanboy thing with Ty West, and I wasn't sure how this was going to go. I knew that Ty West could make some badass horror movies, like, of that I knew, but I wasn't sure how the Western thing was going to play out. And it really worked for me. Again, it's the other thing personal about it. I love the retribution to bullies, which you get a lot of this.
Yes.
And I am such a dog person that, like, it would be hard for me to watch that dog scene again. Like, that's one of those scenes that I would be tempted to skip because it's just too fucking traumatizing. It's too traumatizing. So, even more so than Josie Wales avenging the death of his wife and child. I was like, you have to make this right. You have to make this right, Mr. Hawk. Ethan, you have to kill these sons of bitches. And it's kind of unfortunate because Travolta had nothing to do with the dog. That was not his move. And the top two, you're right, are brutal decision to make. I put A Fistful of Dollars in 2nd place, probably purely for the aesthetic. You have the dubbing and you have the Italian landscapes against the American landscapes, where if you see enough Westerns, you can tell the very notable difference between the two. And, in some ways it helps to that weird otherworldly pseudo-post-apocalyptic vibe that I kind of got in this viewing from it. But it was just the reason that I gave myself to put it in 2nd place. The Wild Bunch is a really energizing experience for me. Again, a lot of it has to do with the last 20 minutes, but I think you need the 2 hours leading up to it to sort of get to know the characters and settle into their world. And it is such a brutal world we're introduced to. The first thing we see in the movie is a bunch of children, for entertainment, throwing a scorpion onto a pile of red ants and watching it get swarmed. And it's a really good, way to situate you in this blood and thunder world that we're going to see. And again, 1969, this must have just blew the roof off of the theaters. Like, it's so epic. Sam fucking Peckinpah. Again, choosing between The Wild Bunch and A Fistful of Dollars. I mean, I apologize for putting us in that position. So I'm not gonna say, how dare you? How dare you put A Fistful of Dollars the number 1? But for me, I had to put The Wild Bunch. Yeah. I just had to do it. I don't think we're gonna fight.
I'm glad you mentioned the scene with the kids at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because what we're seeing is the climax of the movie there.
Kind of, yeah.
That was a really clever symbol that he threw in there. Yeah, very talented man. So
And so endeth another Rank and Review. Please, everybody, lend your ears to the Shelf-Shedding Movie Show hosted by the venerable Mr. Jason Dubray. And R&R will drop every other Wednesday. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
How does one decide between a fistful of dollars and the Wild Bunch? I mean, what an unreasonable thing for me to ask Jason and I to do. That's not fair. It's not nice. It's unkind. So we didn't match, but it was close enough, really. Close enough for government work. If you have your list, if you want to explain what you think the rank should be, you could do that by writing me at ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. You can check out my website at ranknreview.ca, and you can look forward to more episodes of Rank and Review every other Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening to my show. I really appreciate your ears. Tell a friend, be a friend, and keep listening.